I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. This is the Happymodel Mobula 7, and at first glance it looks a lot like a tinh-whoop, but it's got a couple things that make it stand out. For one thing, it's a little bit bigger than a tinh-whoop. How much bigger? Oh, about that much bigger. This is Newbeedrone Nectar. It's not technically a tinh-whoop, but it's a tinh-whoop. And you can see that the Mobula 7 is just a little bit bigger. And oh, by the way, this is the Emax TinyHawk. And the reason I'm reviewing the Mobula 7 is because when I reviewed the TinyHawk, so many of you guys were like, what about the Mobula 7? I don't know why you're so interested in it, but hey, okay, I got it. Thank you, Mobula, for sending it to me. The other thing that makes the Mobula 7 interesting is that it runs on 2S. But the question we're here to answer today is more actually better? Is a 2S tinh-whoop twice as good as a 1S tinh-whoop? Or maybe it's a little too much of a good thing? Let's find out. The first thing I saw when I opened the package of the Mobula 7 was, of course, the Mobula 7. And an instruction sheet with full instructions, including little screen grabs of the Tyrannus about how to bind it, how to set it up, Betaflight configuration basics, and, no kidding, a charger. And you can see I'm actually charging the first packs, and it comes with 4 batteries. Love it. You have already halfway won me over, Mobula. We got to fly it, of course, and see how it flies. But I really love it when manufacturers include good instructions, manuals. So many times in this hobby, you get a product and it basically is just they stuffed a quadcopter in a plastic bag and threw it in the mail, and that's it. You got to figure it all out for yourself. They include a charger. This is nice. This is I mean, it's a little flimsy. The plastic, it's a little flimsy, but I mean, you could easily pay $30 for a charger like this. Really good too. It's got the option to charge either high volt or 4.2 volt regular. Oh, let's get that over at high volt. Here, let's see. I forgot to switch that. Let's just switch that sucker over. We want high volt, baby. 4.35. Now, I always charge my whoop size batteries to 4.35. Now these are marked high volt, but they're so small, you just need all the volts you can get. And yes, they don't last as long, but if you don't charge them to 4.35, you get 2.5 minutes. You get a ridiculously short flight time. So I charge them to 4.35, they die, I buy new ones. But we're here to talk about the quad. And what I want to talk about with this quad is this. When I first started flying micros, I was disappointed. Every single micro that I flew worse than a 5-inch quad. To which many of you are saying, duh, what did you expect? It's like I was used to driving a V8 engine sports car, and then I got in a little go-kart, and I was like, well, it's so slow and it handles like crap. That's a very good analogy, because you have to use each vehicle in the environment that it's tailored towards. If you take a tinh-whoop and you try and fly it through a multi-GP race course, you're not going to have a good time. But if you take a 5-inch quad and you try and fly it indoors through the office like this, you're not going to have a good time. And that's the point. What I want to know about this quad is what's the ideal environment for a 2S tinh-whoop? Because I worry, and we're going to find out, I worry that this guy is too fast and too powerful for the kind of tight indoor sort of fun, low stakes, having a good time environment that tinh-whoops excel at. And I worry that when we take it outdoors, it's not going to be powerful enough to make flying in the outdoors around the trees really fun. And the only way to find out about that for sure is to take it out and fly it. So let's go do that. When flying outdoors like this, I almost wish I had a little more up tilt, to be honest with you. It's capable of speed, but because of the fixed up tilt, I don't want to pitch down. I don't want to pitch down and not be able to see where I'm going. For this kind of flying, it's reasonably pleasant. There's a little bit of washout on the turns. just a little bit. We just got the 3.5 volt warning. Oop.
3.5 volt.
Which that's configured in my Tyrannus, but just not going to worry about that when flying little one-cell batteries like this. Small batteries. Oop, hang on. It's a reasonably sharp turn. Honestly, for the little quad like this, a sharp turn like that with this amount of control is pretty impressive. We're not getting RSSI warnings. The little antennas on these guys often struggle to get the kind of range you want. We're not getting any RSSI warnings. It's pretty good. Let's go around the house. Oh, and frankly, there we go. I knew that would happen. Frankly, we're at 25 milliwatts. 25 milliwatts on the VTX. The range is pretty good. Oh dear. Oh. Whew. I didn't know my line through there very well. 3.3 volts we're holding at. Getting good flight time, 2 minutes 30 flight time. That's the minimum I would expect, but we're still in there. The camera is pretty wide angle and has a lot of fisheye. And it makes hitting gaps like this a little harder. You can barely see, I can barely see the gap I'm trying to hit until I get closer, both because of the camera's exposure and because of the fisheye. Now let's see, where's the gap there? It's a little hard. 6.1, okay, we gotta bring it in. Let's see if we can acro this guy. And I just would never try to do this on a little 1S whoop. Not with the stock motors anyway. I know you can acro a TinyWhoop, but everybody who's doing that is using upgraded motors. I don't know what this nonsense is either. How poppy is it? Not to the moon, stratospheric. The camera is going to make... Oh, there's no fling to it. The camera is going to make acro hard because it's hard to see, like the scraggle here. To make out because of the exposure, it's hard to make out where the scraggle is. There's no fling to it. I'm not going to do any acro moves like where I pop over a tree and split acid. Oh yeah. Oh. Got a little prop wash there. Prop wash, hard prop wash there. Crash.
3.5.
The bind button is right here. It is super tiny, and it is a kind of button, it's kind of fragile, so be really careful if you're poking this with a screwdriver. You can accidentally kind of scrape it and damage it. It's not a piece of hardware, it's just a little flexible piece of plastic that pops down with a film of metal underneath it. It's unfortunate that the bind button is not located somewhere where you can easily get at it with the canopy on. It kind of sucks to have to take 3 screws out and take the canopy off. If you knew where it was, you probably could fish something in there, but I just don't like it's kind of risky to do that, isn't it? It is nice though, according to the instructions, and let's see if this works, that you don't have to hold the bind button down while you're plugging in the batteries. So you can, where your bind is, you plug in both batteries. The red and white LEDs are blinking. That means, I guess unbound? I don't know. Now we're gonna press the bind button and hold it. And that goes solid. And that indicates that it's in binding mode. And now, after entering bind mode, it is blinking slowly, and that indicates it's been bound. If this is your... I don't know what your problem...
Telemetry lost.
I know. If this is your first time setting up a quad, I've obviously skipped a lot of steps here. I have a playlist I made to teach you how to build your very first 5-inch quadcopter. And although this is not that quadcopter, the steps for setting up the flight modes and setting up the transmitter are actually pretty similar no matter what quad you've got. So I'm going to put a link down in the video description to the video in that playlist that I suggest you start at if you're just setting up the Mobula. Here's the first thing you should do when you set up your Mobula 7. Go to the configuration tab. Down here where it says USB, turn that off.
Telemetry lost.
And the buzzer will no longer beep when you're plugged into USB. Mobula, make that the default. Another thing that I would change about the configuration of this quad is that it doesn't come with air mode enabled. And this is very, very common for micro-sized quads because the convention is that when you arm them, the motors don't start spinning. And if you enable air mode, then as soon as you arm the quad, the motors will begin spinning. But I always enable air mode because when an air mode is disabled and you lower the throttle, the motors just stop. It just shuts down, and I don't want the quad to shut down while I'm flying it if I accidentally lower the throttle too much. So I always turn air mode on, and that is going to make my make the quad be able to go to zero. It's going to make the quad able to go to zero throttle without shutting down. If you want the ability to stop the quad by lowering throttle, which may be desirable if you're flying indoors and crashing a lot, the ability to just, lower the throttle, stop the motors, let the quad finish falling and flopping around, and then raise the throttle and take off again, then leave air mode disabled. But you gotta remember to keep the throttle up while you're flying. So for these quads using these small TinyWhoop batteries, I like to change the minimum cell voltage to like 3.1 or even 3.0. And the warning to... Where's the warning 2.9? That doesn't make any sense. Because I just find that I run them down lower or you just don't get any life off of them. So we should be cutting off now right around 6.0 volts. What's 7.5 divided by 2 is 3.75. So we're at about storage voltage, but we still should be able to fly and have it stay above 3.0. Let's see if that's true. And it's good to go. I just don't really feel like these guys are great at acro.
3.5 volts.
I like exploratory stuff with them. I'm losing it. Damn you, rapid fire. There you go. Thank you. Jeez.
3.5 volts.
I just don't feel like they have enough. What are you going to do with acro? I mean, this kind of exploratory stuff is fun. But so much of what I think of as acro involves flinging the quad. I probably just have to learn to want to do different things. So yeah. I just have to learn to work within the capabilities of that drone. Oh, it was good. It was good. Just do acro on a different scale. Whoa. Back up.
3.5 volts.
The next question that I need to address is, how does this guy fly indoors on 2S? And the worry that I've always had about these 2S TinyWhoops is that they'll be so powerful indoors that they'll kind of be pointless. So let's do it. And I do want to let you know, I am flying in angle mode. I think angle mode is great for flying indoors because when you smack a wall or something, the quad can autocorrect faster than your fingers can. So let's give this guy a go. I'm just going to fly around here a little bit. I haven't set up gates. I'm going to be leaving town to go for Thanksgiving to visit my mom. So I haven't set up the gates because I'm trying to finish this video before I leave town. But we'll do a little bit of semi-precision flying here. And I gotta say, I confess that this is not my first pack, but I gotta say, oh.
3.5.
I gotta say, I actually think it's pretty good. And for one thing, the throttle is manageable. You can run it on 1S if you want to. They have an adapter for that. The throttle's manageable, maybe less manageable by a less experienced pilot, but I find it totally manageable. It's definitely faster, but the flip side is that because it's running on 2S and the motors are more powerful, it's actually more controllable, I feel like, than a TinyWhoop usually is, a 1S whoop usually is. And you especially see that when it corrects from a bonk. A 1S whoop, a 1S brush whoop will often, when you get a bonk, well, that was not a great example. A 1S brush whoop will, when you correct from a bonk, will often just sort of, it's less likely to correct and more likely to just flip out. Come on, get out of there, baby. No, it's not going to happen. Whereas this guy seems to have enough power to rapidly correct from a bonk and recover a little bit more than a 1S whoop would. I continue to be unimpressed with the camera on this. The exposure is just not great. Like in here, it's kind of overexposed but manageable, but then as I go to fly in here, it's totally white. You just can't see anything. And it's not like it needs a second to adjust. You really literally it's just going to sit there and keep doing that. Let's take a closer look at how this quad is put together. The frame is more or less the same in design as all the whoop frames that you've seen before, just a little bit larger. The batteries are held in by this 3D printed bracket, and it could be better. It works, but basically they use friction to hold them in. And depending on the size of your batteries, you may get more or less friction. I have had a lot of these batteries bounce out during crashes, and I wish they were more secure. So I would love to see a more secure way of holding this in. With the thicker batteries, this is a Newbeedrone Nitro Nectar. Maybe it's thicker or maybe it's just puffy because I've used it. With the thicker batteries, they hold a little more securely. But this is the receiver antenna coming out the back here, and it does hang free. It might be nice to secure it just a little bit to help it not get snagged or anything in a crash. It's not too likely to get bound up in the props, but it's still, I know that people who build these microquads sometimes like to glue it to the side here. The VTX antenna is here, and it's nothing fancy. It's a linear antenna, not circularly polarized, and I think it's a monopole. I used to work in RF. I should really know the answer to that. It is definitely shorter than optimal for range and reception, but it is it'll get the job done. The video transmitter on this guy, when you go in the smart audio menu, and it is smart audio capable, which I love. I think I'm really glad to see that almost everybody is making, just every quad is now coming with VTX remote control, the ability to change your VTX settings, channel and power via the OSD or even via Lua scripts. And oh, by the way, the receiver in this guy, a lot of times they're D8 receivers. It's a D16 receiver, and that's great because it fully supports telemetry. In other words, you can use Lua scripts if that's what you're into. You can't see that it's soldered on. The VTX is here in the back of the camera. It's a single piece unit, and it is soldered on. And that's a little bit of a shame because I've recently got some of these. These are the new Lumineer Axi Mini. They are a tiny Lumineer Axi antenna with a UFL connector. And for a lot of my quads, like this TinyWhoop here with a UFL connector on the VTX, I have been running things like this Cloverleaf. And this gives better coverage than the linear antenna that we've got here, especially in high multipath environments like whoops are often flown in. But this guy, I mean, given the choice between this Cloverleaf antenna, this is the Furious FPV Cloverleaf, and it's one of the best Cloverleafs you can. The way they reinforce the inside here really helps. But this guy, I mean, come on, no contest. I was really hoping to be able to put that on here, and yeah, if I was willing to cut this and solder it on, I certainly could. It would be nice if it was a UFL to let you do that a little easier. I do like the way they've done this, though. It's not so long that it's going to get caught up in the props or anything. It's stiff. It's going to stay in place. It's reasonably secured. A lot of these quads, you'll see they come with just sort of a antenna flopping and flapping around, and you have to think about how to secure it. It's nice that they've accomplished that. Now, I will say that I do not love the camera in this. One of my biggest complaints about microquads way back when they started getting popular was that the cameras were universally garbage, and that has changed. A lot of microquads are coming with fairly decent cameras on them. But this one, I mean, you can see in the DVR footage that I'm going to show you, that I did show you, that it's got some issues with exposure. It can be hard to see where you're going because the screen is dark, but then you fly out into the light and poof, it blows out. I'm not a big fan of the camera on this, and I think this is one of the weakest parts of this quad, which is otherwise in a lot of ways really pretty good. Now, the flight control board comes with soft mounting gummies here, and it's supposed to snap in here and be held in place. But you can see that some of my gummies are not positioned correctly. One of them was above the top of the board. I guess the board slipped down. One of them is below the board. I guess the board slipped up. As you get this, I don't want to cut that thing. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. As you get this from the factory, I would definitely give a look to whether that's happened to you. I think it's just because the frame is kind of flexy that they're able to do that. I would definitely want to check and make sure those are all seated so that the flight controller is not flopping around. If you take this guy apart, as I've done, when you're putting it back together, do be careful about these wires. It seems like it's really easy to, as you're putting it back together, to squish these wires down and maybe sort of bind or cut them. You wouldn't want to do that. I think I'm going to try to... How am I going to get them out of the way? Yeah, they should come out the back and maybe out the side here. Yeah. Okay, I have completely lost track of where I am in this video because I've been flying the crap out of this thing. But I'm going to finish it. I got to record an outro to this video, and I'm totally ready to give you guys my conclusions and a couple of final thoughts after a few days of flying this. The first one is that this is pretty cool, but if you leave it plugged in and charging, it will kill your XT60. It will kill your battery. It doesn't appear to have a low voltage cutoff. So yeah, be on top of that. Oops, I killed a 4-cell just by charging, and then when I came back, oops, it was dead. It doesn't claim to have a low voltage cutoff. I can't really, I'm only myself to blame, but just heads up on that. Speaking of batteries, when you plug these guys into the serial adapter, they're like basically 2 cells in like a 3-cell or 4-cell pack. So they need to be balanced. These are the cells that got halfway through charging, and some of them are at 4 volts and some are at 4.2 volts, and you wouldn't want to mix them like that for the same reason that you wouldn't want to have imbalanced cells on a regular battery, because your voltage is going to read like, 8.0 volts or 7.5 volts, but one of these guys might be at 3.0 and one might be at, 3.7. And then the one that's low will sag out. You also would not want to mix capacities. Whenever you use this, make sure the 2 packs are the exact same capacity and the exact same, basically fully charged. Don't mix state of charge. Okay. I want to point out this guy does come with a little adapter. It comes with a great little accessory kit, including you can change the prop, and it comes with this thing. I'll even take it out. Oh no, there went all my spare parts. This little guy here, that's an adapter to let you use it with a 1-cell battery. So you can just plug this in instead of the second battery and use it out for one cell. So what is the final word about the Happymodel Mobula 7? I was prepared to dislike this quad. I love my cute little Volkswagen Bug of a TinyWhoop. This is the Newbeedrone Acroby, actually not a legit TinyWhoop per se, but I love this little guy, and I was prepared for this to be a clunky mishmash. None of the charm, too much power, not powerful enough for outdoors, and I gotta tell you, I was wrong. I was wrong. Record it, play it back, make a GIF out of it. This guy is kinda fun outdoors. It's fast enough to be fun outdoors as long as you understand its limitations and don't try to fling yourself over a tree and split S it, right? You gotta know your limitations. But it's fast enough to be fun, and there are probably places outdoors where you would enjoy flying this, where you might not feel comfortable flying even a 3-inch with open props because maybe you're at a park and there are people or dogs around. You could smack this into a pedestrian and nobody's going to get hurt. And that, I think, is the place where this suits outdoors. When you're flying, you want the speed of a bigger quad, some of the speed of a bigger quad, but you don't want the risk of a crash. This is a great quad for that. If you want something that flies more like a 5-inch, go up to the 2.5 or 3-inch class, and those guys actually start to really feel not unlike a bigger quad, but the risk is a little bit higher there as well. Taking this guy indoors, even on 2S, it was manageable for me. For a brand new beginner pilot, the throttle might be a little harder to manage, and you might want to try and tame it down, or heck, just plug it into 1S and run it on 1S and it'll slow down. I was really impressed with how much better than a 1S TinyWhoop-ish quad, how much better this flew, most likely because of the upgraded motors and the higher voltage. It cornered more precisely, it recovered from smacks and whacks better, and it just felt, well, it felt more like flying a bigger quad. Not in that it had too much speed for conditions. I was still able to zip it around, behind the TV, underneath the desk, in almost all the same ways that you would a smaller quad. But it was faster, but because I felt like I had more control, the fact that it was faster just kind of made it more fun. So I gotta say, this guy comes in about $95. It's on pre-sale now for $95. It's available with a full D16 receiver or EU receiver, 25 milliwatt VTX. That is, I guess, one limitation, 25 milliwatt VTX. You look at something like the Acroby, it goes up to, I think it goes to 200 milliwatts. But 25 milliwatt VTX comes with a little whoop charger. Damn, this is really freaking good. So then the question you guys are asking is, how does it compare to the TinyHawk, which is everybody's freaking favorite? And they both come in at about the same price. And the big difference is that the TinyHawk is a 1S quad running 450 milliamp hour batteries packs. The difference there is not as substantial as it might seem, because the brushless motors and the high KV on this guy make up some of the performance difference. But there's just no question that the Mobula outperforms the TinyHawk in terms of speed, and especially if you try flying it outdoors, the Mobula is definitely going to win. The place where I think the TinyHawk is going to pull ahead is the TinyHawk. I think it has better motors. Like the TinyHawk motors, they look like they have bearings in them, and the Mobula motors, I'm pretty sure, have bushings but not bearings. So I think the TinyHawk is going to last a little bit longer. Also, the TinyHawk's frame is really well designed. It just is really durable, and I've talked to other people who have been testing it for a while, and everybody agrees that most of them haven't even changed a prop. Just basically, it just keeps crashing and getting back up again. It's completely self-contained. There's no antenna to get stuck in the props. It's just a really nicely designed package. Whereas the Mobula, I mean, time will tell, but like these whoop-style frames, they commonly break here and often have issues with the stuff getting bound up in the props or the props getting messed up. The TinyHawk seems to do a little better job than that. But for me, if I had to pick one of these to spend about $100 on, I have to say it would be the Mobula. Maybe it's just because it kind of looks like that old Volkswagen Beetle TinyWhoop form factor that I've come to be sentimental towards. But the flexibility that this quad has is, I think, what puts it over the top for me. You can fly it on 2S outdoors, and then if you come indoors, you can fly it on 2S if you want to, and really have just a little bit more performance than your typical 1S quad. But if you want to run it on 1S, you can, or you could even just use a Betaflight feature to sort of scale the throttle down a little bit and give you a little flexibility. I never knew what I was missing in terms of a TinyWhoop's performance. The better cornering and the quicker recovery from bonks really puts this over the top. So I guess the takeaway is 2S too much for indoors? And the answer is no. It turns out it's just about right. Happy flying.